All right, folks. Well, then I think everyone that is attending or planning to be in attendance today is present. So I'm going to call to order at this time the Milk River Intercounty Drainage Board. We'll do some introductions here and then get on with the agenda that you see on this screen. My name is Michael Gregg. I'm with the Michigan Department of Agriculture and Rural Development, and I represent the director of the department, Mr. Gary McDowell, in the role of chairperson of the Drainage Board. With us this afternoon, we have Ms. Amelia Steele, the Wayne County Drain Commissioner, Mr. Brian Baker, the Chief Deputy Macomb County Public Works Commissioner, and also from the city of St. Clair Shores, we have Brian Baker and Matt Koppler. Not Brian Baker, I'm sorry, Brian Babcock, the Public Works Director, and Matt Koppler, the City Manager. I don't believe our other board member, Mr. Joe Recker, the City Manager with the City of Harper Woods, has joined us at this time. With that, board members, I do need to read a statement as to the executive order under which we are convened, and then we'll proceed on with further introductions. This meeting is being held in compliance with Executive Directive 2020-2 dated March 13th, 2020, and Executive Order 2020-48 dated April 14th, 2020. Electronic, either telephonic or video conference attendance will meet the quorum requirements, and public participation will be allowed on the designated part of the agenda. In accordance with the recommendations of Executive Order 2020-48, all votes will be taken by roll call. So with that, board members, if you would take a look at the agenda, and if you have any changes, now would be the time to bring those up. Otherwise, to approve the agenda as presented.
I'll make that motion.
The City of St. Clair Shores will support.
Very well. That was a motion by Chief Deputy Baker and support by Mr. Babcock for approval of the agenda. Any discussion on that motion? Seeing none, we'll do the roll call vote on that. Wayne County?
Yes.
Macomb County?
Yes.
St. Clair Shores?
Yes.
And the chair, yes. Very well. So under welcoming, again, to our public participants, we do appreciate you attending, and please bear with us. This is certainly my first experience at a meeting of this nature with this many participants. We do have the City of St. Clair Shores, Becky Spada.
Yes, said that correctly.
Thank you. Who is handling a lot of the background electronic interface with this system, the Zoom system, as well as Mr. Kyle Seidel from Anderson, Eckstein, and Westrick, our consulting engineer. You'll be hearing a lot more from Kyle in a few minutes here. We do have a lot of information to pass along and share with you. This has been an issue that the Drainage Board has been working diligently at trying to determine the impacts of the high lake levels in Lake St. Clair, and as well the impacts that the pumping station may have on properties along Milk River and in its general vicinity and tributaries. Again, we will be getting into a lot more detail in just a few minutes on that. We also have some other guests with us today. We have Mr. Bruce Smith, the city administrator with the City of Grosse Pointe Woods, and as well the City of Grosse Pointe Woods Public Works Director, and that he is Frank Schulte. Frank is with us. We do have, I believe, with Wayne County, Patrick Cullen. Is that correct, Mika? I believe Patrick Cullen is
I'm here, Mike. Hi, everyone.
very good. Thank you. So in addition to those folks, we have Brett McDonald, the chief engineer with the Southeast Macomb Sanitary District. And let's see, Brady Harrington with my Department of Agriculture and Rural Development. And I believe Mike Harrington, is Mike Harrington on? Engineer with Anderson, Eckstein, and Westrick. Did I leave out anyone that should be introduced at this time? Oh, how about Mr. John Brennan, the Drainage Board's legal counsel, of course. So I can't see everybody because the agenda's up, so I've kind of lost track there. So again, bear with us here, and we'll get on with the balance of the agenda. So with that, and to our legal counsel, Mr. Brennan, I'd like to turn it over to him to explain the circumstance under which we've convened this meeting.
All right, thank you, Mike. Well, as most of you probably know, last year the city of St. Clair Shores issued an emergency declaration and order from Michael Smith, the city manager, that dealt with the fact that the lake levels at Lake St. Clair have been rising, and the threat of flooding has become serious and is only getting worse, as will be explained later on by Mr. Seidel. That order requires that certain sandbagging activity happen where the city indicates that there is an imminent danger of flooding to protect the health of property. The Milk River Board, which most of which have been introduced to you today, at their last meeting, they had been looking at data relating to, again, the lake levels going up and the possibility that rain events might cause the function of the Milk River pumping station to create more volume down the Milk River, and had a study done which will be spoken about. But as a result, they passed the board passed its own in a declaration of emergency in cooperation with the city of St. Clair Shores, primarily because that's where most of the Milk River area is that is going to be affected. I believe there's a small portion of Grosse Pointe Woods that might also be impacted as well. That declaration of emergency permits the drainage district to take certain action in order to alleviate potential flooding caused by those conditions. And it's designed to cooperate with the city of St. Clair Shores primarily in connection with their own emergency declaration. Those documents are available on the city of St. Clair Shores is available on their website. The Milk River Declaration of Emergency is available at MDARD's website. They're not particularly long, but they basically give the entities the ability to take some action, which is the whole point of this. And I'll be explained in much detail later, but the essence of it is that the Milk River Drainage District is going to take the lead with regard to sandbagging activity that is impacted by its functions on the Milk River. So I've been asked also to talk about the rules of the meeting and how they work under under our sort of unusual circumstances here. The Zoom format is great, but it does not permit very easily contemporaneous comments, spontaneous comments. So your input into the Zoom meeting needs to be muted until you've been recognized in order to make a comment. And how that's done will be explained in a second. But so please do not attempt to speak until you've been recognized by the moderator and then your microphone can be unmuted. Also, some of you who may be familiar with Zoom know that there is a chat function where you can type out comments during the meeting. That functionality is not going to be permitted in this public meeting because those chat functions can be private, and since this is a public meeting, any comments made in connection with the meeting need to be made publicly and heard by everyone. So that functionality is not going to be made available. Now, there will be questions, and of course that's what we want, is we want you to be able to ask questions and make comments during the public comment period. So after Mr. Seidel gives this presentation about what's going on and what the plans are so you can get some information, then the moderator will ask if anyone has any questions, and you'll be able to virtually raise your hand, and you can do that in two ways. There is a hand feature on the Zoom conference software, and I believe that's done by clicking on the participants icon, and then when you see the participants, you can go to your name and essentially click to raise your hand. And Becky, if I'm not speaking correctly about that, you can always jump in and correct me, but that's basically how it works.
Yeah.
And then also, if you are not on the Zoom format, all you need to do is to press 9. I don't know if is it 9 or star 9. Is it just 9?
I believe it's just 9.
Okay. If you press 9 on your phone, that will send a signal to our moderator, our host, that your hand is raised, and your name or your identification is already in the Zoom program because you called in, and you'll be called upon, and at that point, your phone can be unmuted and you can speak. I believe is it star 6 to mute and unmute, Becky?
I'm sorry, I was checking on the telephone function. What was that?
Yeah, for telephone muting and unmuting, is it star 6 to unmute and to mute?
Let's see. I'm trying to pull that up here at the meeting.
Or can you just control that from there?
I'm able to control that from here.
Okay, so when you get recognized, if you're on the phone, if you get recognized, you will be automatically unmuted or unmuted by our host moderator, and then you'll be told you're open and go ahead and ask your question. And that way, everyone can hear each other, and we can get everyone's questions asked. We'll take as long as necessary to make that happen. Thank you.
Thanks, John. Appreciate the explanation. And again, we'll work through this, and hopefully everyone will have an opportunity to be able to ask their questions, and we can provide that information. I'd like to move on now to item 6 and the project overview by Kyle Seidel. Kyle is a professional engineer and certified floodplain manager with the engineering firm of Anderson, Eckstein, and Westrick. The Drainage Board solicited several professional services proposals, and their firm was selected to provide the service and provide the plans and recommendations that you're about here. We've been very pleased with their work effort. He's got a great team working under some very difficult circumstances with the stay-at-home orders. So he and his colleagues have put together a very informative presentation, and I will turn it over to Kyle to take that over now.
Thank you, Chairman Greg. I'm going to start off with just a very brief history of the Milk River Pump Station and just give you an overview. For those of you who called in on your phones, you won't be able to see the screen, but I will be showing some slides as we step through this presentation. If you would like to go back after the meeting, the video is recording on Facebook Live, and you should be able after the meeting to go see some of the spots that you may have questions about that you may not be able to see at this time. So the Milk River Pump Station services approximately 100,000 residents in the city of St. Clair Shores, Grosse Pointe Woods, and Harper Woods. The facility experienced its groundbreaking in 1958 and is located at 1190 Parkway Drive. And I'll just zoom in here and get a little closer. This is the Milk River Pump Station, and the blue line is the Milk River, which goes out to Lake St. Clair. This facility, the Milk River Pump Station, operates to alleviate local infrastructure during times of wet weather, and as a result, may raise the elevation of the Milk River during heavier wet weather storm events. I wanted to just let everyone know that for more information regarding the Milk River, we posted a link on St. Clair Shores website. So if you go to the home page of St. Clair Shores, you can scroll down to the bottom of the page, and under the quick links, you can click on Milk River Sandbagging. When that screen pops up, we have posted information regarding the public notice that was sent to all the residents' houses. We have information, we have the emergency declaration. We also have information on the Milk River Pump Station. We also have links to the U.S. Army Corps' daily lake level recordings, which is a useful tool, and also the U.S. Army Corps' projected monthly lake levels, where they do a 6-month forecast every month to project the lake level in the future. We also on this page have posted our preliminary Milk River flooding maps, which shows the extent of a still lake water coming up the Milk River, and then when we have all the pumps running at the Milk River. The U.S. Army Corps monthly produces this report, which I have marked up with a markup tool. And this report is for April 2020. And what this does is it records the median monthly lake level of Lake St. Clair, and it projects the next 6 months forward. And I'm just going to zoom in here and show you where we're at. We anticipate that the next report, the May 2020 report, will be out around May 4th to 6th by the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers. In the April report, the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers is projecting that Lake St. Clair on the high end, on this projection line that I'm pointing at here, could be 4 inches higher than the peaks that we had last June, July. And they also plot on here the median, which is this green line in the middle, and then the red line at the bottom is the low end projections. Currently, the month of April has been a little drier than normal for our district. And as you can see, through April 29th, the current mean elevation of Lake St. Clair is approximately 2 inches under the projected median, which is good news. We anticipate when the May report comes out that we may see some reduction in the high lake levels that are anticipated for June and July. I do just want to put a cautionary note, and I've said this to people before. If you recall back in January, we got about 3 inches of rain in a several-day period. That 3 inches of rain impacted Lake St. Clair by 10 inches. It rose 10 inches based on that 3 inches of rain. So just because the Army Corps has a projection that's several months out, that doesn't mean that the lake could not go higher with local rainfall. So I just wanted to make everyone aware of that. As a result of these projected high lake levels, in December of 2019, the Milk River Intercounty Drainage District commissioned a study of the Milk River drain from the Milk River pump station to Lake St. Clair. This study was done to see the effects of the high lake level, the projected high lake levels, with running all the pumps at the Milk River pump station. Additionally, in the Milk River, the city of St. Clair Shores owns a pump station, the Alger pump station. And there is another private pump station for Lakeshore Village, which discharges into the Milk River. All these pump stations were modeled at their full capacity, along with the high projected lake levels, to determine a flood area and to determine if properties and structures on the properties would be at risk of flooding. This hydraulic model has been updated several times with the changes in the projected lake levels, and we anticipate updating it next week again when the U.S. Army Corps issues its May 2020 6-month forecast with those projected levels. I'm now going to show you the current flooding maps. And one thing I'd like to note is that the maps that I have up on the screen today and the maps that are on St. Clair Shores website today are based on 1-foot contours that were completed by SEMCOG several years ago. The contours that this floodplain is mapped on has a resolution of plus or minus 0.5 feet or 6 inches. That means that the elevation is within plus or minus 6 inches from these contours. Recognizing that larger variation, the Milk River Board authorized in March a new aerial flight of the Milk River and several of the surrounding streets to get a higher accuracy survey. On April 2nd, 2020, Drone View Technologies flew this entire area and they processed a survey that's plus or minus 0.2 feet. That's approximately plus or minus 3 inches. This gives us a much better accuracy of the location of the floodplain and its relationship to the structures along the banks of the Milk River. This survey was received by AEW yesterday. It was flown on April 2nd, but it took some time for the company to actually process all that data. We received that yesterday, and we are remapping the 100-year floodplain, or not the 100-year, the projected floodplain on that map. And that will be available Monday at the latest on St. Clair Shores website. I will just zoom into a couple areas here to give you an idea of what we're looking at. Two things were mapped on this. The red shading on this map indicates the limits of the still water of the projected high Lake St. Clair water surface in June and July. The blue outside of the red, the blue shading, indicates when we have all the pumps on at the Milk River pump station. The Milk River pump station pumps with all pumps running 2,000 CFS. That's cubic feet per second. It is a lot of flow, and it raises the water surface a couple feet at the upstream end of the Milk River. We will be looking at putting in sandbags in areas of high risk. And what I wanted to do, these maps, I'll just scroll through for those of you who are watching. There's not large areas that inundate houses, but there definitely is areas that we need to protect. One of the big ones was the Lakefront Park and the infrastructure on Lakefront Park. So there's actually 2 pages to this. I'm going to go to the second page. Just bear with me while this loads because this is a large file. I just want to let everyone know these are preliminary maps and we will be republishing these on Monday with a higher resolution contours. Lakefront Park has issues where we have flooding that can get into residential areas through the backside of Doremus and also threatening the community center. On Monday, April 27th, this week, Landscape Services, Inc., a contractor to the Milk River, started the sandbagging implementation at Lakefront Park. And I just want to show you several pictures that Mike Harrington, our field supervisor, has taken out there. This is out near the mouth of the river where it enters Lake St. Clair. And basically, the sandbag levees will be stacked in a pyramid, but they'll also be wrapped in a visqueen. This is the finished product you see of the levees that have been constructed this week. And I will just step through these pictures and you'll see they're essentially, if we were to build a 3-high sandbag levee, you would have 3 bags on the bottom, 2 on the next level, and 1 on the next level, just like a pyramid. So that's what's underneath those areas. In areas where we see that water can breach from a lower ground into another lower ground, we installed levees. We also installed these along the marina. Keep the water from damaging property. The big question that I'm guessing everyone has is, which properties will get sandbagged? Not everyone who got the public notice will get sandbags in their backyard. Not all areas are at risk along the Milk River. I will be putting up on the screen our determination of basically how we will go about determining whether to put sandbags in the backyard. So the question is, how is it determined if a sandbag levee will be installed on my property? That's what most people want to know. Based on the topo that I mentioned earlier, that we just received yesterday and will be published on St. Clair Shores website, we will compare the projected lake level, not lake level, the projected Milk River level with the high lake, with all pumps running, to the finished grade of the house. If there is 10 inches between the lake level and the finished grade of the house, vertically, of freeboard or greater, then no levee will be put on that property. If there's less than 10 inches of freeboard between the projected water surface and the house, we will complete a ground survey in the rear yard, which is plus or minus 1/100th of a foot, to determine if and where the sandbag levee will be necessary. Anderson, Exine, and Westrick has a field supervisor, Mike Harrington, who's been out in the field for the last several weeks prepping and managing locations of sandbags in Lakefront Park. If sandbags are needed in your property, Mike Harrington will knock at the front door. We have issues obviously with COVID. He will keep his social distance, so he'll knock on the door and step away. Prior to us getting into any of the rear yards, we are asking that a landowner agreement be signed by the residents to walk through their yards. This agreement will be posted on St. Clair Shores website by Monday. Our field supervisor will also have this agreement with him. You would only need to sign this if we need to access your property. Along the entire reach of the Milk River, there is an easement. So it's possible that we will be able to access the easement through certain locations, and we may not need to access everyone's side yard to actually install the sandbags. We're going to do our best to limit disruption to the residential areas, but we do ask that residents complete this agreement allowing us to get in the backyard. And it simply says that the homeowner acknowledges that the field supervisor will notify you before any clearing may take place. And I'll talk about that. There may be brush or other small items that temporarily will have to be removed in order to install the sandbag levee, possibly some minor landscaping to actually build the levee. And we'll communicate that with the homeowner through our field supervisor prior to that being done. Any damage to the property will be repaired by the Milk River contractor. That's what this agreement says, including fencing, pavement, landscaping, or any other damage caused by the construction activities on the property. And if the contractor does need to bring heavier equipment to transport sandbags, they will be using plywood to drive on in the rear yards, so as to protect the yards from rutting of heavy equipment. I've had a couple questions that I've heard people say. As you've all read, I believe, the public notice. The public notice states that the Milk River is going to cover all the costs of the sandbagging operation, and that is true. They're covering the engineering, installation, management, everything. People have asked, well, what about when this emergency declaration is over? Do I have to remove the sandbags myself? No, you do not. The Milk River will reach out at that time. Once the emergency declaration is lifted, a reasonable time after that, the Milk River will reach back to all the properties and coordinate removal of the sandbags and any necessary restoration at that time. Mike, that concludes my presentation, and I will turn it back over to you.
Thank you, Kyle. That was well done and thorough. But I'm sure there are questions, and we are prepared to address those. And now would be that time for folks who have a question or want further explanation to raise those. As indicated earlier, there is the raise a hand feature in Zoom for those of us, or those of you who are joining by video, or the phone option of, was that a press 9, Becky?
Yeah. Yep.
By pressing 9. So with that, Becky, do you show anyone with a raised hand or other questions?
Yes, we have one raised hand so far. It is Mike M. Let me unmute his microphone.
Hello. Hi, Becky. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Welcome.
Okay, excellent. Thank you. Thank you for hosting this meeting. I really appreciate the notice also that was on Facebook. That gave me an opportunity to stop working my day job and join this, so I appreciate that. Kyle, question for you. You did mention that houses or properties where the house has 12 inches of freeboard between it and the projected high water mark when the pumps are running would receive sandbags. Did you really mean house, or did you mean permanent structures on the property? My garage, according to the chart, is at 580 feet, and that is in the same band as the projected high water level with pumps on. So are you protecting only my house, which is at 581, or would I receive sandbags in that circumstance? And of course, I'm not asking for a commitment right now. I'm just trying to understand what you meant. If you meant house or structures on the property.
Thank you, Mike. Mike, do you mind letting us know your address?
Sure. Here it comes. It's 23364 Westbury, right
Okay.
at the intersection of Westbury and Gary.
Okay.
Lane.
All right. Yeah, so basically we will be installing sandbag levees to protect structures on your property, not houses. I didn't say structures. I thought houses would be more recognizable to the public, but we will be protecting the structures. That would include garages, house, sheds, basically anything that's insurable.
Yeah, okay, insurable. I did have one other question, if I may, and it does tie in with insurance.
Okay.
When I bought this house 15 or more years ago, I had a land survey performed, and it showed that my house was above the FEMA floodplains, so my mortgage company did not require flood insurance. Now, of course, insurance is a personal decision, and I am considering adding a flood insurance policy because of the exceptionally high levels. But do you know, are those charts being updated where mortgage companies will come back to us and require it? Like I said, that's not so much a question for me because I'm already considering adding flood insurance, but a question for maybe others who are listening and for the public record. Do you know if it's going to become a requirement?
So if you have a federally backed loan on your property and you reside within the FEMA 100-year floodplain, you are required to purchase flood insurance. Okay, basically every loan is a federally backed loan unless you say borrow money from a relative or a friend. So if you're currently mapped out and not paying flood insurance, people who are outside of the 100-year floodplain can buy flood insurance also. It's substantially cheaper when you're not in the 100-year floodplain. As you saw in the public notice, there is a 30-day waiting period to actually get the insurance. And FEMA does that because people will buy it when the lake's coming up and hope that they can be insured for an instant in time. I do recommend everyone who lives along Lake St. Clair or the Milk River to consider getting flood insurance. It's available to every property, not just those that are within the 100-year floodplain. The difference is the risk is less of you flooding if you're outside of the floodplain, and you pay substantially lower premiums. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, it answers half of it. The other half has to do with the charts. I assume the insurance companies would know where the charts are. I guess what I'm trying to say is, I know the charts were updated about 10 years ago, the FEMA charts.
Oh, the FEMA flood insurance maps. Okay, gotcha.
Yeah, flood insurance maps, thank you. That's what I meant to say.
Yes, they were, yeah, they were updated in 2006, the maps, and then they did a restudy in 2013 for this area. And as far as I know, there's no remapping planned in the near future in Macomb County. They could always restudy the lake. They did that several years ago. And with more data now at the higher end, it pushes up that 100-year floodplain is what it does.
Yeah.
So
I might be, but yeah, okay, got it. Those were my two questions. Thank you very much. Becky, please put me back on mute and I'll listen into the rest of the conversation. Thank you very much.
All right, our next question or comment comes from Mr. Chris Vitale. I will unmute him now.
Hi there.
Welcome, sir.
A number of residents have irrigation systems for their lawns that pump out of the Milk River. Are they going to be accommodating that with the sandbagging?
Kyle, your thoughts?
So are you asking, are we gonna cover up the sprinkler heads, I think?
No.
Oh, okay.
Typically the water line is will be some sort of a hose. You know, some are just glorified garden hoses. Some are maybe more what you'd think of as a fire hose, but they lead into the Milk River, and they, just like people irrigate from the canals and lakefront properties.
Gotcha.
Going around those, so they'll still be able to irrigate during the summer.
The intention would be to attempt to go around those, but those site-specific issues will be worked out with Mike Harrington, with the property owners. Our intention isn't to limit people use of the property, other than you will have a levee between the lake and the house. So we'll do everything we can to make sure that we can support the existing systems that the residents have. If it's going to cause more risk of flooding, we'll work that out on an individual basis with the property owners.
In all honesty, Kyle, that was more just a sort of a heads up concern. I'm sure you will. The other question I had is, you mentioned removal of the bags. Would that occur upon some notice that lake levels are going to be lower? I mean, and how long would those bags be there? What's the time factor for that?
Currently, we're estimating at the soonest it would be December 2021. Things change. So when the emergency declaration is removed by St. Clair Shores and the Milk River, where we no longer see a threat of flooding to the properties, a reasonable time after that would be when we would remove the sandbags.
Okay.
But,
Well, I guess only other input I would put in is because I do know a number of residents in this area, and there is a pretty high proportion of senior citizens. So I guess I would just ask kind of for some understanding and expect them to be a little bit panicked by this. And, of course, as a council person, I'll be fielding questions, but just more another sort of heads up for you. There's a lot of people that have never seen this happen, and they've lived there for 50 years. So.
Thanks, Chris.
Excellent questions and comments. That's exactly why we wanted to have this kind of a meeting, is to get that kind of input. So very much appreciated.
And
Who's next, Becky?
to make a note real quick, my apologies. It is *9 that people need to dial if they do want to raise their hand over the phone. Our next question or comment comes from Mr. Kevin Lowers.
Hello. I reside at 23154 South Rosedale Court. So I am the second house south of the Rosedale Bridge on the west side of the river. And I've been in contact with Brian Babcock, and probably 2 to 3 years ago. Do you remember, Brian? And met with the district, the drainage district group to discuss the possibility of berms, because at that time, and this is before high water, my neighbor and I were having problems when the max pumps were on. There was flooding into our yards at that time. And I offered the solution of the possibility to build a berm on our property to stop this. Brian came out with an engineer, I believe at the time, and they discussed doing some surveys. And the final resolution was that the Milk River District was going to do nothing, because they stated that if they built a berm and the water got on the house side of the berm, there would be nowhere for that water to get back into the river, and there create more of a problem than without the berm. So my question now is, with the sandbags becoming this berm that we had asked for years ago, are we going to run into the same problem where, say we have a 50-year storm, 3 inches of rain, are the sandbags going to stop the water from getting back to the river, and therefore cause more of a problem than the river itself?
Excellent question, and one that we have anticipated and discussed. And Kyle, I'll turn it over to you to explain what we've decided to do with those.
Yeah, so thanks for, that's a great question, Kevin. What we plan to do, where we have larger drainage areas, trying to get down from the localized rainfall to the river. And now you have a sandbag levee blocking that local rainfall from running off to the river. In certain locations, we will be putting a 3 or 4 inch pipe just below grade with two 90-degree bends, which will go underneath our sandbag wall. It'll have a backflow preventer in it, so water can only flow out. And we will leave a extra sandbag there that we could put over the top of the pipe on the dry side to give additional insurance that we don't get backup through the conduit that we put underneath that. But we have a detail of that with our contractor. And in the locations where we have a large catchment area that needs to flow to the river, we obviously don't want the localized rainfall to flood the house behind the levee. So we are taking precautions for that. Does that answer your question, Kevin?
It does, if you're telling me that that's going to be in my yard or my area.
Yeah, can you tell me your address once more, and I'll make sure that we do.
23154
23154.
South Rosedale Court. Again, if you look on your map, my backyard is pretty much blue.
Okay.
So I'm assuming that you're going to sandbag my my yard.
Yeah, you're just south of Rosedale.
Yeah, I'm the second house south. So the first house and the second house, we both had issues prior to the high water level. Even when the 6th and 7th pump, and I think it's the 6th that does it. When that pump turns on, there's so much flow that we believe it's hitting the bridge itself and coming back onto our properties. Again, we raised this with the Drainage Commission 2 years ago, but there was never any resolution to the problem at that time. There's some of my thoughts before, not just the berm, but do you have to have 7 pumps or 6 pumps running all at the same time? Because there's so much flow and there's so little volume that can get underneath that bridge, especially with the water level so high. There's very little capacity below the bridge, so there's nowhere but for the shoreline, for the water to go to that's coming from those pumps.
Right. So the Milk River, the firm capacity of the Milk River is 6 pumps. So 6 pumps is really the most that would ever be run. That is what the design capacity. We always have extra pump. So if you pull one out and it can be repaired, that you can do that. So in the last 2 or 3 years, we have not had more than 4 pumps run. And you're right, the lake is high. The lake restricts the flow from the Milk River. Most of the open area under Rosedale is occupied by still water. And the bridge does cause an increase in the water surface when the pumps come right there. But on your property, I had it up on the screen, I believe there are the 2 properties. We will put,
yes,
we'll put a pipe with a backflow preventer, and you could see generally where that levee is planned to be down by the lake. The levees will be installed with a 1/2 foot of freeboard, just so everyone knows. So whatever level we projected the river to get up to, we will have the levee be a 1/2 foot higher than that. Does that answer your question, Mr. Lowers?
yes.
Thank you.
And thank you for that question. Again, we were anticipating those issues. So I'm glad that you've reinforced the concern that we saw as well. If you look over my shoulder, you'll see one of the pump motors of the Milk River Station in the background. So they are massive. And you're right, there's a considerable amount of flow generated. And we do have the two station operators, Brett McDonald, the chief engineer, and Brent Avery, the supervisor of the Southeast Macomb Sanitary District with us. And Brent, I don't know if you want to weigh in at all regarding the necessity of all of those pumps.
Well, at any large storm event, we would initiate pumping action early to try to avoid a peak pumping event where we're needing to use 5 or 6 pumps. So we're going to do everything we possibly can to mitigate the storm event and approach it early on and try to avoid that situation if at all possible. You know, we need to protect the drainage district, the entire drainage district. You know, so there's a small possibility to use 5 or 6 pumps, but we're going to do everything we can so we don't have to do that.
Thanks, Brent. Becky, do you have other hands raised?
I am currently seeing no other hands raised right now.
Well, perhaps board members, do you have any comments, or our attorney, anything that we've not covered that you think we should while we're waiting for others to possibly raise their hand?
Hey Kyle, this is Brian. How long are the, I think we've covered it, but how long are the sandbags designed to last? Is it the 2 years?
Yeah, it's approximately 2 years. We did purchase the heavier duty sandbags, which will last longer in the direct sunlight. And we're wrapping these with the visqueen, which protects the bags also. We're hopeful that they will be up we're hoping that the lake just drops, but we're hoping they last up to 2 years. And I guess we would ask if there's sandbags in your backyard that you leave them be, right? That you don't crawl on them, because they do become fragile over time as the sun beats down on it, and the plastic does break down and they break. So if you do have sandbags in your backyard, try not to let kids crawl on them or monkey around with them. And we will be back to take those down when the emergency declaration is removed.
Kyle, you'll also restore, you know, like grass seed and things like that?
Yep, that'll be taken care of at the same time when we remove them. There'll be grass seed put down, because obviously the grass will be burnt out or whatever's underneath that. So we'll have to restore those areas.
All right. Other questions?
I just wanted to, I just wanted to say a couple things about the agreement in case anyone's just anticipating some questions that might come up later if you haven't thought about it. The drainage district has an existing easement along either side of the bank of the Milk River, and so, you know, it has the right to take action in that particular area. But the reason we're asking for the agreements is because for 2 reasons. One is we may need to have access, as Kyle described, on your side lot to get back to the backyard to place the bags. And also in some areas, we may need to place the bags in an area that's not, strictly speaking, within the drainage district's easement. The land agreement does not expand the easement. It's not a permanent expansion of the easement. We're not going to record these documents with the Register of Deeds. They're just temporary permissions, basically, that will allow us to take those actions and respect your property rights. So we need the permission to do the work, and we're not asking to take any property rights from you. It's all just a question of getting cooperation so that we can do the work, and also to help you comply with the City of St. Clair Shores emergency declaration, which would otherwise have the property owners having to spend the time and the money to construct these berms or sandbag levees. So that's all I wanted to say, other than once you sign them, we will be, or the district will make a copy and send it to you by mail, so you have a copy for your own records.
Thank you, John, for that clarification. I'm sure that those questions were in the backs of some minds, so appreciate that. Other board member comments at this time?
I believe there's another question.
Yep, there is another question.
Oh, okay, good.
It is from telephone number ending with 8111. I will unmute you now.
Hi, Becky. It's Mike M. again. My computer crashed, so luckily I was able to dial in with my landline. I had another question regarding the City of St. Clair Shores no parking ordinance. I see that a lot of these streets could also be flooded during some of the rainstorms and high pump activity. Last summer, we saw Westbury Street go under many inches of water, making it impossible for us to drive back to our residences to even try putting our cars up into our driveway, making it necessary for us to park our car on the streets and potentially leave them overnight. Is the police department at all involved in possibly relaxing the no parking ordinance during flood emergencies so that homeowners who are in affected streets can leave their cars someplace else safely without risk of getting a ticket?
Excellent question, and I think we'll defer that to Matt Koppler, the city administrator.
Is he on the line, or is he going to answer at a different date?
I'm just got unmuted.
Oh, awesome. Thank you.
And I saw also Brian was getting ready to answer. Brian, having been here, can probably speak to how we handled that last year.
Yes, and we we don't anticipate having any flooded streets. I mean, the map does show that could happen, but we're going to take precautions to prevent the streets from flooding the best that we can. If a street does flood, though, our police department has always been very helpful in making accommodations for people. Obviously it's a situation out of our control if it gets to that point. So we would definitely be able to make accommodations for other parking.
Yeah, okay. I think this is also something that we would have maybe a little bit of knowledge or foreknowledge that this is going to be happening. And there's always good communication between our DPW and police department when this starts. So I think, those accommodations can be made during those type of events.
Okay. The last time it happened, because I couldn't get home, I went to the police department and I got an overnight parking pass. So it wasn't a big issue for me, but not everybody may have that forethought or opportunity to do that. And regarding street flooding, though, I do want to point out, just in case you weren't aware, at high water levels, the water comes back up through the drains in the street. So it doesn't have to get past the levee. It goes under the ground through the drainage system and floods our street. So it's a very regular occurrence. I expect it, living this close to water. And luckily I haven't been trapped by it as yet. But it is, like I said, another question that I thought was worth asking for both myself and for others on the call. Thank you. Becky, go ahead and please mute me again. I'm done.
Thank you.
Anyone else, Becky?
I am seeing no others.
Okay. Well, we'll go back to board member comments. Ms. Steele.
Let me unmute her.
There we go. Had to unmute myself there. I guess my only comments, I just thank you, Mr. Chair, for calling this meeting, and to you and the other members of the subcommittee for your time and work on the sandbagging project. And, I support the recommendations of the subcommittee and the action previously taken by the Drainage Board to move forward with the project.
Thank you for that. And yes, we've got a great team that pulled together a lot of work very quickly. So I appreciate that. Anyone else with a comment, question? Again, this will be available by Facebook live streaming and recorded and possibly replayed at some time, Becky? Or how do you? Yeah.
We'll see how we can make the file available on the city's website on the Milk River page perhaps, or through another medium.
Sure. So for those folks who couldn't join us during this call, if you know of a neighbor or someone that would like to have this information, certainly direct them that direction. Hopefully that will be possible for them to see the same information. And for those of you who called in by phone and might wish to see some of the visual slides that we were able to show you, that would be a good way to do that as well. Well, folks, it's getting close to dinner time, but we are here if you wish to ask a question. We can certainly stay on this conference as long as you wish to have information. Mr. Smith, anything from the city of Grosse Pointe Woods?
Nothing at this time. We're just glad that we're able to protect the properties and keep flooding in the residential areas to a minimum.
Very good. Well, folks, board members, it appears, I guess, that we have pretty well reached the conclusion of this informational meeting. Ultimately, we did convene, but no action to take that I have heard, unless you have a motion for some specific decision. But otherwise, we are close to the point of adjournment if there's nothing further. If not, a motion to adjourn the Milk River Intercounty Drainage Board would be in order.
The city of St. Clair Shores will make that motion.
Very well.
Wayne County supports.
Very well. I will call a roll call vote on that motion. Wayne County?
Yes.
Macomb County?
Yes.
City of St. Clair Shores?
Yes.
And the chair, yes. Thank you, folks, for your attendance and thoughtful questions. I think it was very helpful for us. And as was indicated, we do have Mike Harrington from the engineering firm Anderson, Eckstein, and Westrick that will be available on call both by phone as well as email. And that information, his contact information, is contained in that notice that you received and will be posted or is posted on the City of St. Clair Shores website. Kyle, you want to maybe just recite that one more time?
So Mike Harrington's email is mharrington@aewinc.com, or you can reach him by his cell phone, 810-650-8095. I would ask that you use his cell phone during normal business hours to protect his afternoons, as we all would want.
Thank you. Appreciate that. Well, folks, and Becky and Kyle as our co-hosts, thank you very much. And at this point, I believe that concludes our informational meeting. Thank you.